Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast, a weekly podcast whose mission is multifaceted. Each week when you tune in, you will find episodes that question best practices, challenge music education dogma, facilitate conversations about touchy topics, demonstrate pedagogies, and conversations where colleagues learn from each other. This is episode 278, or more appropriately, the 7th birthday of the Choralosophy Podcast. I'm calling this little episode The View from the Other Side of the Mic. 7 years ago, Choralosophy was just an experiment. Today, it's a career. It's a job, no different than your job, albeit a bit more public. Today is the show's 7th birthday, and here's what that means to me, and here is what I've learned. First, a disclaimer. I am self-aware enough to know that some listeners will find this episode to be TMI. They will say, and you will say, get back to the helpful pedagogy content, Chris. Don't worry, I will. But this show was built on an ethos from the very beginning of radical transparency. So this 7th anniversary post is an homage to our roots here at Choralosophy. And as I hit this milestone, I've been reflecting on how the landscape of online work has shifted and how it hasn't. I have also learned that many gatekeepers exist within the legacy of our art form, be it choral music, classical music, music education, you name it. I kind of exist in a bunch of spheres these days. It is a system of hierarchy that I have spoken on before and am quite familiar with by now, and it isn't entirely unreasonable. Every industry and academic discipline will, over time, develop traditions related to who gets to speak. For example, the gate being kept in this case is usually related to legitimacy. Online presentations versus convention presentations would be a good example in today's choral music world. One is seen as legit, and the other is seen as clickbait. Or, put another way, did someone ask you for your opinion, or did you just post it online unsolicited? In my case, it's both. 7 years ago, no one asked me to post my opinion. I just started posting it. But now, people ask me to. The problem is that this is not the normal process for gaining legitimacy in the music education field. It's not the normal process for a generation of music educators who were raised to envision how to build a career. We didn't plan for this. Those of us back in the 80s or 90s, we didn't plan for the internet. We were raised to build our influence and success through professional organizations and institutions and climbing those ladders, not on the internet. But here we are. Stay tuned for 3 other observations from 7 years in the digital trenches of music education, and choral music discourses, and doing the discourse in public. Choir directors, music educators, show planners, you pour your heart into your music. Shouldn't your events get the same attention? That's where Ludus comes in. Sell tickets, promote your concerts, and fundraise with ease. Selling merchandise and concessions? Ludus Retail makes in-person sales effortless. Running choir camps or workshops? They have a classes feature that keeps registrations simple, and when you need help, the live support team is ready to pop up with real answers from real people. The best part? It's completely free for organizations. Thousands of music programs already trust Ludus because great music deserves more than just a ticketing system. Ensemble trips can be more than just a performance. They can build community, inspire artistry, and give students a reason to stay invested. That's why I recommend Kaleidoscope Adventures. For more than 30 years, Kaleidoscope has helped student groups travel with purpose, combining performance opportunities with experiences that deepen musical understanding and create lifelong memories. They'll help you find the right destination, the right venue, and the right balance of music, education, and fun. And they manage the planning from start to finish so you can focus on your job as an educator. To explore options for your choir, visit mykatrip.com or find the link in the show notes. A big shout out goes to the producers and Inner Circle over at the Patreon page. These are folks that are really dedicated to keeping the lights on here at this show. Venture Studios, Chandler Smith, Brian Long, Michael Herron, Kyle Peterson, Steve and Kathy Kakachik, David Kowalczyk, Max Jackson, Angie Schilling, Rebecca Chalk, RJ McCracken, Michael Shimp, and Kyle Siddons. The first observation I'm going to call the quote-unquote real job delusion. Most people still don't see my work here as a real job. I suspect there's both a generational and an ideological divide at play. Younger people that I interact with seem to get it, but by and large, people my age and older don't. And I can't really blame them. My own wife, Beth, who's been on the show many times, didn't take it seriously as a real job at first either. Her first reaction, and she loves to tell this to people at parties, her first reaction was to think of my cute little project with my cute little microphone upstairs in the office. But when that cute little microphone started to help us pay our bills, her tune changed. And so did mine. It changed the way I approached every episode that I made. I began to invest more in the quality of the audio, the video, and cultivation of guests, topics, research, and pedagogy. And I also tried really hard to change the way I approached my own preparation and my own knowledge for each episode. What you see each week is an episode. You see things online. You see things that are short clips. What you don't see are the hours and hours of editing and research and reading and preparation to talk to experts and not sound dumb. So I have to not sound dumb when I talk to all these wonderful people. So that takes a lot of work on the backside of the camera. Now, I am not an academic, and I don't claim to be one. I am working in the trenches and teaching high school choir and working in church jobs, etc. So I'm not an academic, but research is now part of my job. And that's such a gift. How many choral directors can truly say that they are able to dive into the research of the field and get paid for it? As teachers, we don't get paid. That is not something that we are paid to do unless we get like one of those grad school classes that can up our pay if we do a collegiate course. But I am privileged to get a chance to make the research behind this show part of my job. But there has also been another angle that I have become intimately familiar with, and I mentioned this before, an ideological divide to whether or not it is viewed as I am doing a job like any other person who does a job, like you're doing a job, etc. Education at large, of course, is a very monolithic environment, both politically and philosophically. And the monolithic bear does not enjoy being poked. The problem with me is that I enjoy poking bears because I believe conversations are important, especially when there is an ideological or philosophical divide. That's actually the conversation we should lean into. The ideological divide simply comes from people who don't like some of the conclusions I come to, or the arguments that I make, or the values that I espouse. The most touchy ones over the years seem to be related to three main things. One, how important is music reading in school music? Are we reinforcing a standard of colonization from time past? Or are these positions that people have in criticism of teaching reading, etc., and emphasizing reading, or are these positions based on false premises, which is kind of my position? Another one that tends to be touchy for people is to what extent does sex and gender impact the vocal music classroom? I've done a lot of episodes, for example, on our problem in choral music of not attracting enough boys. And I have had people be critical of the way I talk about that as well, because the language is then too gendered for us to have that conversation. But of course, it's a gender issue. And then on the flip side, we've talked a lot on the show about the way women, adult women, are treated in the conducting side of the spectrum. Again, that's more, we have to talk about gender. We have to talk about sex and gender and how those things impact our classrooms. Tangentially to that issue is how we should be treating gendered language and what language should be used and what language shouldn't be used. So that one tends to get me some kickback as well. The third big topic that tends to get pushback are definitions of terms like diversity, equity, and inclusion, for example. Are the definitions of those terms up for debate? I say they have to be. Is there room to disagree on how best to achieve these ideals? And of course, again, I would say that the devil is in the details there. That's the problem. We have to be able to have these conversations without people clutching their pearls. I think we can have these conversations like big kids. But rather than engaging with me on these ideas or disagreements, typically, I usually just experience secondhand or direct criticism or on other unrelated topics. It kind of reminds me of junior high in some ways. It's a very interesting thing that I've learned and experienced over the last several years. One of the most common criticisms that I get is that I'm just creating, quote, clickbait for financial gain. Choosing verbiage, if a person chooses to use these words to criticize me, I think it reveals two things. It reveals two cards that I don't think that they meant to reveal. When the person says this, I think, number one, this is a person who believes that what I'm doing is fundamentally different from any other person who earns an income to support their family. In other words, my job is valid, your job is not valid, so I'm going to say clickbait for financial gain rather than earning a paycheck, for example. I think that's a really strange phrase to use, I think. So I could go to you at school. I could go to you at school, for example, and I could say, you're only showing up here for financial gain. And then you would probably respond, yeah, of course. If they stopped paying me, I would stop coming. Yes, like any other job. The second thing I think it reveals is that by choosing a negatively tinted rhetorical combination like that, the person reveals that they simply don't approve of the content that I'm creating, but they don't want to say it with their whole chest. So that's the kind of the rhetorical environment that I'm observing as I continue to make this podcast and then watch how it impacts the profession. So of course it is totally fair in my mind to not approve of any content that you hear on the podcast or this podcast or that podcast or any YouTube channel or whatever. But it's not probably fair in the modern world to discount online marketing and online work as legitimate work. That ship has sailed, y'all. Like, it's going to get more digital as we go, like it or not, for better or for worse. I also find it odd to criticize another person's pursuit of a higher quality of life in general, especially a public school teacher. Y'all in the audience, you know, we don't get paid enough. So why bust my chops for having a side hustle? Many teachers have them. And all of our situations, too, are different. It's interesting. For many years, even before I started a podcast, I noticed how interestingly unique and diverse our teacher financial situations are also. Of course, I've been fortunate to have church work for almost my entire teaching career, where I've had it be a half-time job on top of my full-time job teaching. That's been pretty normal for me my whole life, but it's hard for a math teacher to do that, for example. But at the same time, we also aren't all in the same family situation. So, for example, not all teachers, or professors for that matter, college professors, are married to, say, a doctor or other high-income professionals. We can't all have that advantage so that our teaching paycheck is the kind of the small potatoes paycheck. Some families that have teachers in the family, of course, only have one income. Some provide for multiple children. Some live in more expensive areas or less expensive areas. Or in my case, I'm married to an amazing woman, but who is self-employed as a voice teacher. She's self-employed, which means she has to pay the self-employment tax and buy her own health insurance. That crap is expensive. The point is, we never know what another person's situation is. And I've just been amazed, honestly, at the audacity of some colleagues to judge what continues to be just a job that is a normal job. So that does continue to baffle me, and I encounter it often. I encounter things like that often, monthly, if not more. So I'm going to give you one example of how I think about this and the work that I do here. And of course, I'm giving you all of these thoughts simply because if you're listening to me right now, that means you find this show valuable. So what that means for me is I feel the need sometimes to be transparent with the audience of what it means to make this show. It doesn't just show up every week. It doesn't magically appear. It takes a lot of work. It is a job, and I treat it like a job. I have a schedule. I pay assistants. There is an entire infrastructure. Choralosophy is no longer just me. That ship went away 5 years ago. 2 years in, probably, I was already having to hire assistants to do various tasks so that this show happens. So it is a business, and we are a team here. So here's the example, and I want you to consider this example. This is just philosophy for free here. When a plumber drives down the road with his phone number and slogans about his quality of work on the side of his van, people don't say, he's just trying to get phone calls for financial gain. That would be silly. They would recognize that that is a guy trying to support his family. They would only say that if they had a specific reason to disapprove of that plumber. Otherwise, they would just see a guy working to pay his bills. My van, my metaphorical van, just happens to be a multimedia web platform. My services, quote unquote, are pedagogies, philosophies, discussions, and professional development. I will not assist with your plumbing. Trust me, you do not want that. But these services are in demand, mostly given away for free. Like I said at the beginning, no one asked me at first, but they asked me now. And what do is I create free content for the choral music profession, and mostly content that I'm hearing from hundreds and hundreds of people regularly that are helping them. So I'm going to keep doing it. The next thing I've learned over the years, things I've noticed, concepts I've noticed, what I would call the depersoning of content creators. Now, of course, I see it happening to others, but I also see it happening from my perspective. The longer I do this, the more people start to see me as not a real person. This cuts both ways. Sometimes I am put on a pedestal. On one hand, I'm treated by people who love the content as being more than a person. They come looking for the answers, quote unquote, rather than simply a source of advice or a perspective. I've shared with the audience many times, I would be worried about you if you agree with everything I say. I'm going to continue to repeat that refrain. But here's the thing. I've been asked for my autograph, for selfies to be taken with me, sometimes by hyperventilating listeners expressing disbelief that they are actually meeting me in real life, and people fangirling. And yes, I'm using that actual term. Both males and females have told me they are fangirling in my presence. Now, first of all, I don't want to criticize that in the sense that it's incredibly flattering that people enjoy the show that much and enjoy meeting me. I enjoy meeting you too. At conventions, please come up and say hello to me. However, just a reminder, I'm just a person. Now, on the flip side of that, the punching bag is what I can also be. So I'm either on a pedestal for some people, or I'm the punching bag for some other people. There is another side of the coin. Some see me as less than a person. Because Choralosophy is a brand, people feel strange sense of audacity. They say things to me about me online, at conventions, and at water coolers that they would never dream of saying to a colleague across a desk. Of course, the reality here is that I'm neither a pedestal worthy or punching bag worthy. I am neither an angel nor a demon. I am just a high school choir teacher. But when the punching bag is in full swing, I hear things like this. I've heard before, you've kind of asked for it, referring to this criticism. It is something I've actually heard on more than one occasion, but to be clear, we are not talking about criticism of my logic, my points of view expressed, complete with counterpoints or rebuttals and arguments. I would welcome that. In fact, I ask for it on a weekly basis. I long for it. It's why I started the show in the first place, to start a dialogue, a robust, lively dialogue. Sadly, I almost never encounter that type of critique. Rather, what I mean are personal attacks, publicly slanderous videos, false accusations of unethical business practices, attempts to get me fired from my school, which has happened from more than one person. Let that sink in. Undermining my professional reputation, encouraging colleagues to never hire me again. I have receipts for all this stuff, by the way. Attempts to make it too dangerous to associate with me, and much more. All of this for a choir podcast, you guys, is pretty wild. It defies belief, in fact. It is a sign of my success, I guess? Maybe, but isn't that a sad commentary on the world that we live in? When you become a brand, people forget there is a person behind the logo who hears the vitriol. The digital screen acts as a shield for the critic, but it's a window for the creator. I see a broader sweep of perspectives of what you all think in the audience, in the choral music profession, around the world, a music education profession. I see a broader cross-section than the typical music educator ever does in their lifetime because of what I do here for my job. And I think this is lost on most people. Remember that consumers of the internet see it from a very different angle than those of us who produce content. Because of my place in the industry, I get a lot of DMs. We are a profession that feels like our speech is trapped, that our Overton window is very narrow. We feel afraid to talk about certain things. We feel like a small number of influential colleagues seek to speak for all of us. And since I am seen as the rebel, I hear from many of you about these frustrations, privately, relying on me to speak about them publicly, putting the target on my forehead. That part, I guess, I've asked for. And the third thing that I'm going to talk to you about today is things that I've noticed, concepts that I've noticed as the creator of this show now for 7 years, is the collective ownership trap. This point is downstream from the second one. There's a strange belief that my content is owned by anyone other than me. In my case, listeners often act as though the platform is owned by the music education profession. Actually, that's not usually listeners. If you're listening to this, you probably don't feel that way. It's the people who see it online and want to comment about it online as if there is a owned property that has some kind of beholden status to a larger profession, or the choral music collective, for example. This creates a strange dynamic where I am held to a different standard than other people. There is a premise that I have somehow lost the right to simply say what I think, that I must be subject to guardrails. It is a bizarre logic. If you serve a community, that community then feels entitled to act as your HR department. I provide a service to the profession, but I am not an employee of it. So ultimately, my conclusion here is why the van stays on the road. After 7 years of navigating the real job skeptics, the depersoning, and the collective ownership trap, you might wonder why I don't just park the van and go back to a quieter, professional existence. The answer is simple. The trade-off for me is worth it. While being a brand comes with its fair share of audacity and guardrail enthusiasts, it also provides a unique vantage point. I get to have the conversations that people are whispering about in the hallways, but are too afraid to say at podiums at conventions. For every person who tries to act as my self-appointed HR manager, there are hundreds more who reach out to say that a specific episode gave them the courage to stay in the classroom or rethink a stale tradition. In fact, I got one right before I turned on this microphone from a teacher who went all the way back to episode 27 on my podcast. Keep in mind, this is 278, and found something of value that helped them get through a tough day at school. This is why I do it. This is why I create a social media network to continue to plug those old episodes, because this whole catalog is a monument to helpful professional development for our profession. I'm proud of it. And I'm going to say that with my whole chest. I am proud of what we have done here, and I stand by every single episode in this catalog. People are continuing to download old episodes by the thousands every single month. That's my evidence. 7 years in, I've realized that the brand isn't a cage. It's a megaphone. And as long as there are voices in our profession that need to be heard and ideas that need to be challenged, I'm going to keep the mic on. So here's to year 8. If you haven't already, I really think it's time for you to ditch the bulky sight reading books, the paper, all of the things that are already in the kids' folders in your classroom, because it's not customizable to what they need in the moment. Sight Reading Factory allows this and so much more, including auto-assessment for at-home assignments, no more grading them individually. They can be graded in the moment. So use the Choralosophy checkout code, Choralosophy. When you check out, it'll give you a 10% discount every time you get a membership for yourself and for all of your students, which is really, really important so they can do this at home. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of a conversation. If you are still hearing my voice, that means you're one of the MVPs, one of the diehards, one of the real ones, as the kids say. So if you are willing on the way out to check out a few different ways that you can help me continue to make this show high quality. 1, use the promo code. That's the biggest one. At Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, at mychoirropes.com, at graphitepublishing.com, and endeavormusicpublishing.com. All of those take the Choralosophy checkout code. And of course, now the newest one is 3-Minute Theory. You can get a 15% discount when you enter Choralosophy at checkout there. And of course, going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a positive review is very helpful there, and sharing the episodes to your colleagues in real life and on social media. All of those things are incredibly helpful and allow me to continue to create this resource for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.